So good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon. I guess you've heard quite a few talks about people when they speak about algorithms in education. You know, artificial intelligence is taken over, big data is becoming more and more important. And so I'll want to turn it around and not talk about algorithms in education, but addressing the question, how do you actually educate an algorithm? And I do that because, you know, when you look at education, we kind of know you take this little cute child and then you put stuff in it. And stuff means, you know, you have ethical norms, you have role models, hopefully you have good quality content, you have regulation in education, and then you hope that something sensible comes out of that young person. And on the other hand, you know, you have a different kid, and I have no idea what they put in, but something different came out. And so the question is, you know, and that's from a think tank side, you know, thought, working for the Bertelsmann Foundation as a think tank, what do we actually put into an algorithm? How do we educate it so that something sensible comes out rather than something dangerous? So let's take maybe one step back and look at EdTech first and then return to the algorithms. The good thing about EdTech, it leverages what we do in education. The bad thing is, if we do it badly, it leverages something bad. And just looking at three different examples where EdTech actually leverages something good. First example, democratizing education with MOOCs and similar things. And this is Katya Niazi from Lahore. You know, she took a couple of MOOCs. She almost finished her bachelor in the sciences. And at the age of 12, she started, and at age 14, she made it from Lahore in Pakistan to the World Economic Forum in Davos, thanks to democratizing education through digital means. Or take initiatives like School of One or new classrooms, where by personalizing education, they actually improve student outcome significantly. Or take an example from Germany, where having 600 or 1,000 or 1 million refugees coming into the country in 2015 and 2016, an online university dedicated to refugees came up that is trying now to bring education into the refugee camps in Syria, in Lebanon, in Turkey, and trying to educate people there and not giving them the reason that they need to move, because they at least can get education there. So it's leveraging the good in education, providing access, providing personalization. And given that, you know, we're a think tank, we try to get systematic thinking into a field. And so if you look at EdTech, it really does six important effects. The first one I just talked about, it's, you know, really democratizing education. You know, the teacher can go much further than a classroom. Number two, I just mentioned, is personalization, allowing different learning paths. And that's what School of One is doing. The third one, gamification, increasing motivation for kids. Whoops, there we go. And number four is then very much big data driven, not big data driven, is peer-to-peer learning. Enabling, without a professor, learning in small groups and structuring that. Number five, as an effect of EdTech on education, is trying to find the ideal path through the jungle of opportunities and trying to lead somebody in their career to the feasible or manageable educational product. And number six then is matching people from their competencies to the job market. So those are the key effects EdTech is bringing us, and all of them depend somewhat, and four of them depend strongly on algorithms. Personalization, gamification, orientation, and matching all wouldn't be possible if algorithms wouldn't drive that technology. And as I just told you with education, you take the child, you can go good or you can go bad. It's the same thing with algorithms. I mean, it's a neutral thing, and depending on what you put in, you can really create better opportunities for all, in the sense of more equity, more access, more quality. And I'll give you 3 examples in a minute. But just to mention a few here, you can personalize content. You can, as I said, give better access, or you can match individually to jobs. Or you can actually decrease equity, create inequity, and you could target weak customers, as some of the universities have been doing. You can discriminate, or you can create labor market exclusion. And so my point will be, it's not really the algorithm which is good or bad. It depends on what you do with it. And so I'll come to the question of, do we have to regulate it? What can we do in order to really get the good stuff out rather than the dangers? So let me give you 3 examples of what can go well and what can go possibly wrong. My first one is the question whether you support students or you select them. And so you have a chance to derive personal characteristics from online behavior. And some people, like at ASU or Austin Peay State University in Tennessee, and now the Tennessee University system, they use it to support students in their way through all the curriculum offers at a university. So identify strengths and weaknesses, offer information for better choice, and maybe flag individuals that need extra support by their advisors. But you can use the same technology as some of the for-profits have been doing it in the past and might still be doing, by targeting the individual who's very vulnerable. You just went through a divorce, you were looking online for getting a loan or whatever, and suddenly, pop up all those advertisements for this great for-profit education you'd always been wanting, trying to get things to you might not really need, and really identifying vulnerable people. Same technology, same algorithms, more or less. The question is, or the point is, the algorithm can only be as good as the ethical norms you put into. So we got to talk about those norms. Second example is a little more difficult. It's about the question of how you get students to the right schools. And if you look, for example, in this matching process of what people have been doing in New York City, they've been doing a pretty good job in trying to get high school students to their high school of choice. And they used to have a manual matching scheme, and people complained a lot about not having gotten the right school or having to travel all the way through the city. Now it's algorithm-based, and actually people are much happier. The number of students getting their first choice of school has increased, and so the algorithm has done pretty good. It's transparent, people know more or less how it works, and it really tried to address the wishes of the parents and the students. Very similar system in France. There the question was, how do you get graduates from high school to the university of their choice? Basically same question. Highly debated, highly critical process. First of all, because it has a strong bias by social economic status. Why? Because one of the criteria was how far you lived away from a university. All the good universities were centrally located in Paris. Only a few people could afford living close to those universities, but they had a better chance in getting in. Richer parents could afford to move just before the election or selection process near the university. Poorer parents couldn't. Second problem here is transparency. The student union wanted to know how this algorithm works, which makes a very important decision for the life of the students. And the government says, we're not going to tell you. And so they went into lawsuits and say, right of information, we'll want to have that algorithm. Government tried to defer that decision. And in the end, if I understood correctly, after they had to give out the code, they printed it and put it in postal mail to make sure it is as inaccessible as possible. And if you create intransparency, people won't like what you're doing with algorithms. So second lesson learned, an algorithm can only be as good as the also unintended consequences, creating a bias by social economic status, and can only be accepted if transparency is ensured. Third example, from the matching side and the job market. So how do you get people with skills to the jobs? There have been a couple of tools where you try to measure competencies by algorithms. Some do it by computer gaming, some do it by psychometric testing. And some of those things work pretty well. And you analyze those competencies, you offer new job perspectives, and you maybe show chances for mobilization, for building on your competencies for further qualification. But then you've got issues on the other side, and this is especially in the minimum wage sector, also here in the US, if the market becomes rather monolithic or a monoculture. If there are only very few algorithms deciding on whether you actually get a job interview or whether you're sorted out beforehand. And people say that up to 70% of the jobs in the minimum wage sector are actually sorted by algorithms and not seen by people. And so what happens is if you have a monopolistic pattern and you're sorted out by that one algorithm, and if that one algorithm is dominant, or if you have three players all using the same algorithm, you're sorted out by the algorithm for good and have no access to the job market anymore. And then a very crucial question for you, whether you have access to jobs, is decided by one pattern of an algorithm, and you don't get second or third chances because the moment you apply, you're right away out of it. So an algorithm can only be as good as the diversity it embraces, because you want to have, despite the fact it's algorithmic decision making, you want to have a diversity of algorithms and decisions based on important decisions like that. So things can go wrong, and we're in the process of trying to understand where it can go wrong, and very happy to talk to people who are interested in the field and help us understand that better. So wrong intention or wrong ethical norms was one of the things I mentioned, unattended consequences, social bias, another, lack of diversity I just mentioned. Typical other problem, one-sided feedback. Look at the job market example. You get feedback from the people you actually hire. You know whether they perform. You don't get feedback from the people you sort out, and you never know whether that was a wrong decision. And by that one-sided feedback, you feed your algorithm with data that is somewhat biased in itself. ... Many more things to be explored. So my point for the remaining probably good 5 minutes will be, I think we really have to talk about self-regulation. What I mean by that is education is a highly relevant field for the general public. And we've seen in another field like banking what happens if one bad example affects a whole industry and even the good guys. And it really is a point of how an industry, in this case the education industry, the EdTech industry, basing their work on artificial intelligence and algorithmic decision making, how they together can create a system that allows the good things and is hindering the others, so that they can't, destroy in the public opinion the good ideas that can be used from algorithms. So let me present you 4 ideas of how I think we have to go about to educate the algorithm and make sure we'll get the good ones and sort out the bad ones. The first one sounds pretty trivial, but I don't think it is. It is create a broad and common platform for public debate. Because what we see today is that there is a certain public debate about controlling the algorithm and dealing with AI. There is a political debate and a debate in science, and there is maybe a debate among those people who are developing and using the algorithms. Unfortunately, the 3 debates are not really connected. And I think if we want to come to sensible solutions and a common understanding, we better move those 3 circles and merge them so that we really have a platform for common debate from people, from science, from politics, from the general public, and from industry. And I see people like NGOs like us to be the ones who could provide such a platform, and at least for the German European context, we're trying to do exactly that. Number 2, I think we need to develop a common understanding of which algorithms we need to look at, which algorithms we need to regulate, and which algorithms can do whatever they want and the general public won't care. I mean, you know, how a car rental company is managing its car fleet by artificial intelligence and automated decision-making processes is not as important as the question of how you're admitted to a university or matched to the job market. So what we've been trying to do is develop a mathematical formula, and you feed in algorithmic processes, and it's not rocket science, it's a very simple mathematical formula, and then, depending on the market structure, the level of control, is the algorithm just offering you information or is it matching you? And by the reach and impact, is it, you know, addressing your core rights as a citizen? Is it addressing everybody or just a small subgroup? Comes out a list prioritized by the algorithms. I mean, that's just an example. But we just, you know, ask a scientist for us to develop somewhat a mathematical, primitive, simple formula so that we can lead a political discussion and say, yes, in that field there are hundreds of algorithms used, but among all those algorithmic processes, only 5 are really worth looking at it. So the mathematical formula assigns, you know, some number between 0 and 15 or so to each algorithm. 0 to 5, leave it alone. 5 to 10, you might look at it. Anything above 10, you better care about and think about regulation. Create a common platform, prioritize, and number 3 is then develop actually criteria, what we commonly consider a good algorithmic process. How much transparency do we need and do we want to give? And we know if everything's transparent, people will hack the algorithm, no good either. Number 2, can I repeal? Is there a mechanism that if I think I'm treated unfairly, I actually can appeal and have it corrected? Maybe wrong data is stored about me, maybe the algorithm works in a biased way that is disadvantaging me. Number 4, diversity of the market structure. Is there enough competition of different algorithms trying to solve the same issue? Again, all that examples for criteria, but I think we do need those criteria, and I'm happy and inviting everybody who's interested to come and lead this discussion with us, and we're just looking at it from a European perspective, happy to get intake from anybody in America. And number 4 is then, how do we get stakeholders become and get involved in actually taking on responsibility for making that system a good one? So on the one hand, it's watchdogs. It's NGOs controlling how algorithms work today. And as an NGO, we're actually thinking about funding a couple of them so that, you know, we have an independent source of people checking, you know, widely used and highly relevant algorithms, and also maybe creating a system where you get certification of, yes, you are using a proper, a good, a fair algorithm, and having an outside source actually giving you that certificate. Number 2, professional institutions. And, you know, we've seen for MBAs and the banking sector what happens in the past when you educate people and you forget to give them ethical norms for what they do. And I don't think we should repeat that with people writing code and programming. And so we strongly feel that the professional institutions should develop a set of ethical norms so that universities can teach according to those. And yes, also, we need government and regulation. Questions like not only things that are forbidden, but should you have a little leaflet going along with every algorithm as you have with prescription medicine, telling you the side effects and consequences of the algorithm, educating about what kind of data is used, or other ways of making the citizen or the user aware of what's happening with their data. So, to summarize, what I've, just as a start of the discussion, tried to tell you is give you reasons for why we should care about educating the algorithm. So, showed you 6 concepts driving EdTech, leveraging hopefully the good in education. They depend largely on algorithms, and those algorithms can, as I showed you in my examples, strengthen or weaken equity, and that depends on the ethical norms, the transparency, the correctability, the diversity we build into the system. And therefore, hoping to find a common platform for a broad political debate, find a mechanism to filter out the irrelevant algorithms and those who are relevant for equity and access in relevant questions to our society, agree then on criteria and control mechanisms for what we feel is a good algorithm, a fair algorithm, and take on joint responsibility between people like us in the NGO sector, the professional institutions in the industry, and also government in order to regulate. And if we do all that, then I have a very optimistic view that we can take this neutral algorithm and make those little cute and good things out of it rather than those guys. Thank you very much for your attention.